Let me make sure. Yep, we are now recording. Yes, thank you for that reminder. I appreciate that very much. So I just thought what I would do is just start with what you all already know about. You know about the way that the library's webpage is laid out and the way we have this organized. I wanted to show you a couple of things here because it does have to do with electronic resources and again what might help in terms of decision making and making sure that people know how to find information accordingly. So I'm going to kind of talk from two different perspectives. So you already know that to get into our electronic databases such as library and information science, we click on the databases tab. And we know that we can either go directly to the letter and to the name of the database, or we can go down to a specific subject area, such as library and information science. And this is where we have our various electronic databases organized by subject category. And this is the way that a lot of libraries handle that organization accordingly. So again, you know, and I'm going to go into library and information science source, which of course you all are very familiar with and I'm familiar with as well. I should mention that I am actually in my office right now here at the library. And so as a result, when I clicked on the name of the database, I did not get that intermediary screen to enter my buzz-in username and password, so that's why I didn't see that. So the reason I'm doing this is that I want to show you something that can actually come into play when it comes not only to searching electronic resources, but I think what we need to be aware of in terms of becoming and being information professionals and our patron needs, and maybe sometimes why we get the questions that we do. So I mentioned that I was interested in assessment. So I'm going to do academic libraries and assessment. I'm going to come up with a very quick search. But the reason I wanted to do this is I had 380 references and I really didn't limit my search anymore. Now, one thing you're going to notice is that these first two records have either linked full text to the article or the actual full text. Of course, record number 3 doesn't actually have the full text of the article. And we're going to keep scrolling down here. Here we go. Let's look at record number 7, the assessment of quality maturity levels in Nigerian university libraries. So when it comes to electronic resources and certainly making decisions in terms of collection development, we know that most electronic databases anymore will offer some type of full text. I will tell you right off the bat that that certainly is a huge factor on some of the decisions that we use on whether or not we're going to subscribe to an electronic database. We have to be very mindful of this because your cohort in Oregon is an excellent example. You're not here in our library. And by the same token, the students that are in our Emporia cohort, many of them do not actually live here in Emporia. So basically, I would consider almost every SLIM student to be a distance education student in some way, shape, or form, because even our students, both undergraduate and graduate, that live here in Emporia may not be able to get to the library during convenient hours. And there's something else that comes into play too, and I'm going to come back to this in a little bit as well. Subscriptions to journals are incredibly expensive for academic libraries. They just are. Unfortunately, that is just sort of the nature of the game. And so when we are making decisions both on electronic databases and also for journal subscriptions, something that we look at is what indeed is available in full text electronically. So going back to record number 7, this is something we always have to consider with basically our patrons. So if I look at this, the assessment of quality maturity levels in Nigerian university libraries. Again, I don't have a link for PDF full text. Now, if I don't know any better as a patron, my next temptation might be actually two things. I might look at that and say, I'm not going to bother with this. I don't have the full text of the article. Why would I even be interested in the article? I'm going to move on. That's really not the best decision to make, but it is what a patron does. I mean, that's just kind of a reality. And maybe not even getting to the point of clicking on the link to read the abstract and see whether it really is useful. This does look like a pretty good article. So the second temptation at this point might be if my patron has a little bit of familiarity with libraries. The second thing that a patron might do is say, well, you know, I think I'm going to click on this link and see if I can get this article through interlibrary loan. Now, this is, I would say, one drawback when it comes to figuring out what electronic databases we want to subscribe to and how they work. We would love to have different interfaces with different electronic resources that would actually let us, in this particular instance, link back to the library catalog or to our journals holdings to see whether we actually have this journal or not. We don't have this here. And that actually can be a big drawback. It means that, unfortunately, a lot of our patrons will do an interlibrary loan request for an article, and then it gets bounced back to them because we wind up saying, well, actually this is available in another database or in another resource, but they don't know that. So that is one drawback, I think, with some interfaces. What I have to know how to do, again, I can't really expect a patron to know this intuitively. What I have to do is copy the title of the journal, and I'm going to go back to this tab. Okay. Are you seeing the library's homepage again?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So now what I have to know how to do is to go to this tab called Journals, paste the title of the journal, and I don't know about you all, again, considering the fact we are information professionals, we should be familiar with this stuff. But in terms of an academic library, think of an 18-year-old who is basically Googling, you know, is used to using Google, and doesn't really know that there are other types of resources out there. This type of interface can be slightly confusing. I kind of have to figure out from here that I should click on this second link. And even then, this message can be slightly confusing too. So it looks like Library Review is available in a collection called Ingenta Connect up to 2002. But it's also available, and by the way, we do have a separate subscription for this. Library Review is available in a collection that's called Emerald All Journals, but for some reason it's also showing up as Emerald Management 120. Now again, I don't know about you all, I do find this to be extremely confusing. So we have to figure out if we can find a better interface for this. So again, in terms of what we might subscribe to, and then thinking again about what's going to be best for our patron needs. Are any of you familiar with the interface of Browsing? Is that familiar to anybody? Okay.
No, sorry, can you say that again?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I'll speak up a little bit louder too. It's basically an electronic searching interface that's called Browsing, B-R-O-W-Z-I-N-E.
Okay, anybody familiar with that? No, okay. We're clueless.
Okay. That is perfectly fine because I want to show you about this as well. So Browsing is a different way, and it's something that we are subscribing to now, and it's kind of hidden down here. This is another way of searching for electronic journals, and again, thinking in terms of collection development, we decided that we were going to try this interface for browsing. And notice I went ahead and I pasted in the title of the journal again, Library Review. Now this is going to look a little bit different though. What we see here is that we didn't really get an actual hit for this, but we actually got here, Library Review. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. Now this is a lot easier to browse. So let's compare this screen to what I had earlier. When I went to the Journals tab, again, pasted in the name of the journal. This is a heck of a lot more confusing, I think, for our patrons than this might be. So browsing is basically not really an electronic database as such, but it is an electronic searching interface to facilitate searching for electronic journals and articles in particular. This was a decision that we made very deliberately by our library. We were kind of frustrated by this journal search, although it works really well. And more importantly, we went back and we looked at all the different questions that we were getting, both in person and through chat and through email from our patrons who were getting increasingly frustrated with how to find electronic journals. So this was a decision that we made very deliberately. We're subscribing to Browsing right now. We really are going to try to get that promoted starting in the spring 2018 semester. And then we're going to monitor how this is used and see if this facilitates access a little bit better. So again, going back here, this is Library Review for 2017, Volume 66, Issues 6 through 7. If I go back here, Volume 66, Issues 6 through 7, very visual. The Assessment of Quality Maturity Levels in Nigerian University Libraries. There is the full text. And I'm going to go back to this.
So Cynthia, may I stop you for just 1 second?
Yes.
So what I'm seeing here is when we type something into our database search, it's telling us we don't have it.
Right.
When in fact we do have it.
Yes.
And so the browsing is giving us better access to tell us what it is we actually have.
Yes.
Now, I guess my question is, why is it able to identify that we have something when our database search is not able to identify that we have something?
That is an absolutely marvelous question, and that all goes back to publishers of journals. And this, again, is something that we have to take into consideration when we are deciding to subscribe to an electronic resource, and also if we're going to continue a subscription. So, Library and Information Science Source, again, the database that I was searching right now. Library and Information Science Source is not necessarily a contained full-text database. It is an example of databases and vendors, and EBSCO is the vendor that we're using for Library and Information Science Source. Every vendor of electronic databases, EBSCO, ProQuest, you name it, have various and differing arrangements with the publishers of journals. And a journal publisher is the one that actually gives the rights to the electronic full-text access of their journals to a database. It has nothing to do with the library. We have absolutely nothing to do with that. We're kind of sort of at the mercy of journal publishers. So what happened in this case with the one that we were looking at, let's scroll back down to record number 7. So the publisher of Library Review, for whatever reason, has not given the electronic full-text rights to its journal to EBSCO host, or to Library and Information Science Source. As a result, our library carries a separate electronic journal subscription to Library Review, and that's why I had to go outside the context of the database, and I had to search basically an interface such as Browsing to say, Does our library actually have access to this? And if so, what years do we have access to? And I believe that that is probably one of the most confusing things that has been created in the last 20 years, the last 15 years, in terms of patrons. If I don't know anything else about searching databases, if I'm just coming in as an undergraduate student, my assumption is going to be, hey, I can get on a database, I can do my search, I should be able to get everything in full text. And that is not the case. And I cannot tell you the number of times over the years that I have had very frustrated students, understandably, and sometimes I've had students say to me, well, I just don't understand why you don't have access to this article in this database. Again, doesn't have anything to do with the library. Also, a journal publisher can and will pull its electronic full text rights from a database at any time. What that means is that you might go into Library and Information Science Source 6 months ago. You do a search, you'll find an article in full text, and you think, oh, that's great. Well, maybe I'll just come back to that later on. You might come back 6 months later, do the exact search, find the exact citation to the article, but now that full text is gone. It's probably because that journal publisher has decided to pull that. So a full text database is not necessarily a full text database unless it is absolutely guaranteed to be that way. And exceptions to that rule would be databases such as JSTOR, if anybody has ever worked with JSTOR, and Project Muse is another example. JSTOR is a scholarly archive, and they will tend to archive full runs of academic journals up to maybe about the last 3 years or the last 5 years. And so it tends to be more of an archive of information. Project Muse is basically that. Project Muse is a project that will contain current full text to a variety of academic and scholarly journals. But with those couple of exceptions, if you are searching in a database, and here's the kicker. Let me go back here. Let's go back to databases. And this time I'm just going to click on the letter L. And I'm going to go back to one of our favorites, Library Literature and Information Science Full Text. So if I'm a patron searching this database, should I not naturally assume that everything in Library Literature and Information Science Full Text, should I not naturally assume that everything is going to be full text? Of course, I'm going to assume that. But that's not necessarily going to be the case. And as a result, what we have to do in terms of an academic library is we have to constantly balance what's available in a database, what's not available in a database, what do we need to carry separate electronic periodical subscriptions for so that we can guarantee that access to our patrons. And I can tell you it gets tremendously expensive. Our budget right now for electronic resources is a little over $200,000. And yeah, and we have to figure out how we're going to make that stretch and how we're going to continue basically providing access to what our patrons actually need. So yeah, it can get kind of frustrating. So what I wanted to show you is one way, again, that we can make some of these decisions accordingly. So I mentioned that I deal with assessment issues. So something that I actually deal with on a regular basis, and I'm just going to go ahead and do something else here. I'm going to close this tab for now, and I'm going to open up a new tab. There we go. And I am going to move this and get in here. So back in the summer, just a few months ago, our library dean, Michelle Hammond, has been here for a little over a year now. And Dean Hammond is really, really keen on data-driven decisions. And she's very, very keen on metrics. So back in the summer, she had asked me in terms of assessment if I could start really figuring out a way of keeping track in one place of basically all of our electronic resources. And so that actually includes our databases, it includes our electronic journals packages, And it also includes some electronic reference sources, such as the Encyclopedia of Library and Information Sciences, and then some electronic humanities titles as well. And she wanted me to figure out a way that I could do basically a longitudinal approach. So if I could create a spreadsheet that had basically every database, every electronic resource that we subscribe to, and I've taken it back to FY fiscal year 2013. And so what I've been doing is tracking, and I'm going to show you what this looks like here. I have it as a Google Sheet so that I can share this with my dean. And it's also updated in real time so that Dean Hammond can go in at any point and see where we are. So this is what I've done. This is my master list of electronic resources, and I thought you all might kind of enjoy seeing this one. So again, I've listed every electronic resource that we currently subscribe to for William Allen White Library. I've indicated the type of it, if it's a database, if it's an electronic reference source, if it's an e-journal. I have the vendor. I have subscription dates. We have a lot of our databases that are on a fiscal year subscription, but some of them are on a calendar year subscription. So this is really important information because then Dean Hammond can go into this and say, okay, it looks like ABI Inform Complete. It renews as of August 1st. So she can get in touch with me, or I can also be proactive and say, well, before August 1st, I better start providing the usage statistics for ABI Inform to see whether it's actually going to be used or not. I'm going to show you what that looks like too in just a second. I also list if it's an individual subscription. In other words, if our library is subscribing to this database individually. We also have some databases that we get from different academic library consortiums, and you all may start getting into that as well. That could be a way of saving money. If several libraries are negotiating with one vendor, sometimes you can get a little bit of a discount that an individual library wouldn't necessarily get otherwise, but that's starting to kind of go away now. And the most important part I have here is I've been keeping track from FY13 to FY18 that we're in now, fiscal year 18, of the cost of each of our databases. And I've also been keeping track for our dean of the price increase or decrease from one fiscal year to the next and the percent. Now, some of these are going to be a little bit skewed. Like, for example, you see this one with 43%. That was a little bit skewed because we had a prorated one with that one from FY17. And so that one we don't really want to look at. But I'm going to scroll down and find a good one. Oh, this would be good for you to look at too. So line number 7, American Chemical Society Web Editions. That is an electronic journals package. So basically, that's a package of electronic journals that are published by the American Chemical Society. We need to keep that package here at our library to support our physical sciences faculty and students, to support that curriculum and support their research. It is a chunk of change. Our most recent renewal price for FY18 was a little over $27,000. In FY17, it was a little over $25,000. And so what I can see here as I go back a ways, it looks like from 16 to 17 and from 17 to 18, this package went up 7%. And then going back a few more years, FY14, 15, and 16, it went up 5%. And then from FY13 to FY14, it actually went up a little bit more. It went up about 8%. So I can see that an average has been maybe kind of between about 5% and 7%. So why would that information be important? Well, actually, that's something that my dean could take back to ACS, to the American Chemical Society, if she wanted to try to negotiate maybe for a flatter price. She has this information now in front of her, and then she can say, look, this has been going up every year. You guys know this, and I know this. Since we've been a pretty good steady customer, you know, from 2013 to the present, Is there a way that maybe we can negotiate maybe a better price, maybe a better deal, maybe more of a flat price? And those are things that we really have to think about, because unfortunately everything tends to keep going up from one year to the next. So I just wanted to show you that particular list. I have another one I'm going to show you now. I'm going to close this tab now. Open up a new tab again. And I'll show you another list that I've been keeping for Ardeen, and then I'm going to show you how I get the data for this one. Let's go into this pink one. So this looks somewhat the same, but it's a little bit different. This is basically a list, another spreadsheet that I have of our electronic resources, but this one actually deals with our resources that we subscribe to in terms of a calendar year. So basically January 1st to December 31st, or in some cases I have December, and in one case I have November down here. What I'm doing with this, and this is pretty incomplete, so you'll see some blank spaces here, is I am actually going into the vendor side of these databases, and I'm pulling out what we call usage statistics, and I'm going to show you that in just a second as well. So what does that mean? Well, every time that you do a search in a database, it's going to count for something. It can count for an actual search. If I find the full text of an article in a database and I click on that PDF full text, that can be counted as what might be called the full text retrieval of that article. So every time you're doing something, when you're searching in our databases on our end, you're helping our usage statistics. And that's why we really, well, it isn't the only reason, but that's why we do kind of like people to use the databases and use, in your case, the library and information science databases, because then that way we can see that those are useful and at least they are being used. So what I'm doing here is I'm keeping track of the searches and the full text retrievals for the databases that have the full text. I'm keeping track of that month by month. So here's American Chemical Society web editions again. I wound up doing this for Ardeen a few months ago, so that's why I have this here. So I need to go back and add September and now October, and I should have November since we just ended November as well. But from January through August of 2017, for the American Chemical Society web editions, I put in the number of searches and the number of full text retrievals. And I did that based on the subscription price to get a sense of the average cost. So from January through September of 2017, each search in the American Chemical Society web editions cost $42.99, about $43 per search, and the full text retrieval cost about $53 per article. And again, this is just through January through August, so I need to go back and add September and October, and then since we just came to November, I need to add that as well. So I'm hopeful that when I add those 3 months, that will bring the cost down with the full text retrieval and the search, but it's still going to be pretty expensive. Now, here's the flip side.
Cynthia, can you pause there for just one second?
Absolutely.
Is anybody else in the room stunned at how expensive some of these things are? Cynthia, can you scroll down to show us some of the library databases?
Absolutely. In fact, I may need to switch to another sheet because I don't think those are on a calendar year. Let me switch to another here. But I am happy to do that. Yeah, it's kind of sticker shock, actually.
Well, absolutely. So everybody's just been merrily doing things. They were all presenting about their collection development projects.
Yes.
And complaining that they only had $5,000 to spend on their things. But suddenly, if you're looking at essentially each retrieval,
right,
was $53.
Right.
And now, of course, it's very different in public library databases, but for academic library databases, it gives us a very good idea of just how expensive these things are. We can tell you how expensive databases are, but until you actually see how much an individual thing ends up costing. Now, partly, of course, we're a small university.
Right.
So there are things where, now, of course, larger universities may be paying more money, but they may have many more people doing searches.
Right.
But still, just the sticker shock, as you say. Karina, you have a question. Well, no, the question was, are these actual costs? And Cynthia, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the actual price we paid cash dollars
Yes.
for the database for that period of time,
yes,
divided by the number of full text articles that were retrieved.
right, right.
So it's not calculating Cynthia's time, it's not calculating staff time, it is
No.
purely how many dollars did Emporia physically give to the American Cancer Society in order to get this stuff.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yes, yes. We are talking actual dollars. We're not talking staff time. We're not talking any time calculated in teaching people how to use that specific resource. This is just pure dollars in terms of the subscription price. Yeah. Now, I do have happy news, though, because since I am just kind of immersed in this stuff day after day, I am absolutely thrilled to show you and let you know that the library and information science databases are being used, and the separate electronic journal subscriptions that we have to library and information science journals, those are probably our top performers. I can tell you that. I have not calculated my cost yet, but I did want to show you. For library and information science source, this is for FY 2017. And so essentially, this subscription begins in July 1st and ends June 30th. We still have to carry a subscription to library literature and information science full text, which is August 1st, July 31st. But you can see that these costs are actually relatively low in terms of the subscription price. And this is what I absolutely love. So far in FY17, we had over 11,000 searches in library literature and information science full text, and we had over 5,000 full text retrievals. And you notice that we had actually even more in library.
Cynthia, excuse me, could you scroll slightly to the right, because we have the banner, the video banner over there. That's
there
good.
We are. Is that a little bit better now?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for letting me know that. I appreciate that. Now, these are just, here's the kicker too. Actually, this cost is probably going to be even lower, and the searches and the full text retrievals are going to be even higher, because I have not included in this spreadsheet yet July through December of 2016. This spreadsheet just has January through September of 2017. So if I were to go back, if I did an actual fiscal year, which could be in this case July of 2016 through June of 2017, I would be looking at, quite frankly, a very low cost per search and a low cost per full text retrieval for the library and information science databases. I can also tell you, and this is really a nice one too, I can't remember the exact name of the electronic journal, but it was a library and information science journal. It's an electronic one. I was doing calculations for that a couple of months ago, and the full text retrieval for that one on the cost for this journal was like 18 cents per full text article, and that was for FY of 2017. But think about the reason for that. Again, look at our SLID population, distance education. And so what you're doing is you're using the databases, you're using the electronic journals, and you are getting the full text. So we're getting a lot of value for our money there. And I'm actually very thrilled about that. That makes me very happy, because it's extremely, I mean, I would be able to do this anyway, but those numbers make it extremely easy to go back to Dean Hammond and say, you know, SLIM is using these resources. And I can prove that because here are the numbers. So this is the kind of stuff that I work with pretty much every day in terms of the data and the information that I need to go back and give to my dean to give her the information that she needs to make decisions. Questions so far?
Yes, there are several questions.
Absolutely, I'm ready.
Robert, Lynn, and then I'll get somebody else. The question was, are any of our vendor agreements based on pay-per-use, or is everything flat fee, all you can eat?
Oh, what a great question. That is wonderful. The majority of our vendor agreements with databases are flat fees in terms of subscription prices. So in other words, we get a quote for the upcoming year, and then we might be able to do some negotiations, but basically we have to make a decision, again, based upon usage statistics, but also based upon other factors of whether or not we're going to go ahead and pay that price or not. Now, we have talked about going to a model, and it would be kind of a patron-driven model in which, rather than subscribing to a really expensive electronic journal, that we go toward a model in which we would offer basically a cap of interlibrary loan requests, or really it would be document delivery requests for that specific journal, and be able to offer that maybe to graduate students and faculty, and then when we hit the cap, we might have to decide whether or not we would subscribe to that journal again or not. We're not at that point yet because there's a lot of different factors that we'd have to go under consideration. So when it comes to our databases, and absolutely for electronic journals, it's basically you pay the price, and that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
The main search. Okay. Cynthia, the question, and it's not actually the question I thought Lynn was going to ask because it was mirroring something else, but the question is, if rather than going to the databases, if you entered a search into the main search box in the library's front page, is that also tracked? And does it track to the databases, or is that not tracked?
Very good question. Right now, that is something that I am still, quite frankly, puzzling out. And the reason is that I'm going to open up another tab here. Oh, come on, here we go. There we go. So I'm going to take this tab back to the library's webpage. And I'm just going to do a search on, you can see I've done this already, information literacy and assessment. Okay, so the reason I went back and did this is this search that we're doing right now, you'll notice that up at the top here it says searching Discovery Service for Emporia State University. This is actually also provided by EBSCO. We're searching in our catalog, but we're also searching our databases, which is why I have over 500,000 results. But what will happen is that basically this is an overlay of both our catalog and our databases. So if I were to say that I only wanted scholarly peer-reviewed journals, and if I go to this PDF full text, combining self-assessments and achievement tests and information literacy assessment, and I get the PDF full text from here, that is a hit or a result that is coming from one of our databases, but the actual search that I did was in the EBSCO host discovery service. So as a result, if I am in EBSCOhost and I'm running usage statistics for different databases, there is a separate usage report that I can run for the EBSCOhost discovery service, and I can use that to track my number of searches. And more than likely, this particular full text result, it might be reported in that discovery service, but it might also be reported in the actual database. It's really, really kind of confusing right now. I've been using a lot of results from my usage report in the EBSCOhost discovery service, basically to track searches is what I've been doing. Because I want to show, okay, this is the number of searches that we're getting with this EBSCOhost discovery service. But the PDF full text is actually coming from one or more different databases. And so that might actually be tracked in databases. If I can, I want to kind of elaborate on that a little bit, because this is another, not on directories, this is another fun thing that I've been doing as well. So another assessment project that I did last fall, and I did it again this summer for our dean, was to take our electronic journal subscriptions that we are getting through EBSCO. Again, EBSCO is a vendor for journals as well as for databases, which I'm sure a lot of you already know. And I was tracking the number of full text retrievals from our electronic journal subscriptions through EBSCOhost. But this is what I found. And let's do Journal of Academic Librarianship. You can tell what I've been searching because it keeps coming up. So what I found with Journal of Academic Librarianship is that these different ways of accessing it, this full text from Journal of Academic Librarianship is actually in the Academic Search Complete database. So that's not going to be accurate for the actual journal subscription. What I had to do was actually make sure that I was going back to, I'm going to go back here. So Journal of Academic Librarianship, this is a separate electronic journal subscription that we're getting through a collection called Science Direct. This is actually through Elsevier, the publisher of Elsevier. So in order to get appropriate statistics for this, I had to go back to EBSCO to get my electronic journal subscriptions and usage statistics, but I also, in this one, I had to go directly to Science Direct, to this vendor, and I have a separate login and password that I used in order to be able to get the actual statistics if I click on this link. Because when I click on this link for Journal of Academic Librarianship, that's going to be recorded in Science Direct. That's not going to be recorded anywhere else. So I had to go to Science Direct and get usage statistics for those journals through Science Direct. This was a long project, as you can imagine. So in other words, I had to consider the different ways that an electronic journal subscription is being accessed. Is it through EBSCOhost? Is it directly through a vendor or provider? And then make sure that I'm gathering all of these different usage statistics to get a more slightly accurate count of the electronic full text logins and retrievals. I have a very long list of logins and passwords for all of these different vendors, by the way.
Cynthia, is
Yes.
that unusual?
No.
For an academic librarian doing assessment, or is that what an awful lot of academic librarians are doing?
If you're dealing with collection development in terms of assessment, this is not at all unusual. There are some different aggregators out there, and I know EBSCO makes one that we've been looking into as well, that can aggregate a lot of these different they're called counter compliance statistics. And there are some aggregators out there that will make the job a little bit easier, but it costs money to subscribe to those aggregator services, and we don't necessarily have that money right now. So I have a spreadsheet of my different logins and passwords for each separate vendor of databases and also different publishers of electronic journals, and I literally log in with separate IDs, separate passwords, and I download usage statistics reports. And those reports, those statistics are the ones that I'm putting into my spreadsheet for electronic resources. So yeah, it's actually several steps.
Okay, but so my point really was not, this is because Cynthia's crazy, or this because we're small.
Right.
This is a complex problem that every library is dealing with.
Yes.
Some of the larger people with more money are able to subscribe to services that are aggregating this data for them, but they still have the problem of multiple counters going into multiple databases.
Yeah.
So it's not it's not us. It's not Emporia being weird.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's actually really interesting work. I never really thought that this is something that I hesitate to say enjoy, but I am actually going to use it. When you start getting into data, it just gets absolutely fascinating. And I think the fun thing about this too is if I download a usage statistics report for a database, and I have it monthly, because I usually do my reports monthly, I can see the spikes in activity. So September of 2017 might really spike with really high usage for a database. Well, I can verify that because I can go back to our librarians and say, you were teaching that database, weren't you? I know you were in composition or in another class. And they'll say, yeah, I actually was. How did you know? And I can say, because I saw that spike in activity. That helps us, again, tell our story a little bit more, because then we can say, we can track this, and we can tell you not only what's being used, but when it was used, and then we can track that back generally to what we were doing in terms of library instruction or reference. So it all kind of works together. I think it's really interesting.
Okay, but you are a librarian, Cynthia. So
this is true.
Pause there for a question. We have a question.
There's been a lot of consolidation in the information industry with ProQuest and EBSCO, and I don't know a lot about this, but I know EBSCO is working on the Folio project, and I'm wondering if there are institutional policies around choosing one vendor over another based on the consolidation of the industry and how much access there is to information.
So, Cynthia, the question is about the consolidation that is going on in the industry, and are there any institutional policies about choosing one vendor over another based on consolidation, based on how much information is available through one versus through another? Can you talk a little bit about consolidation and maybe how that affects things in general, particularly money?
Absolutely, and that is an excellent question. I'm really glad this has been raised because it's something that we have been facing this basically just all of this semester. So in terms of consolidation, I mentioned that I've been in the profession for a long time. I have seen, oh wow, so many different vendors of databases just really kind of being subsumed or being purchased by larger ones. And I guess what I'm seeing right now, and I could be totally off base about this, I am seeing EBSCO and the EBSCO host interface becoming basically the big player right now. The majority of our electronic databases right now are EBSCO host databases. We have some that are still through ProQuest, like ABI Inform, and then we have a few others as well, dissertation and theses full text. The few databases that we have right now that are not through EBSCO host are more proprietary. They're just not available through EBSCO host. They're only available through one vendor or another vendor. But like I said, the vast majority of ours are EBSCO host. That can be both good and bad. It is good in the sense that if I am doing instruction, I can teach one searching interface, and I'm not asking my students or my patrons to learn a lot of other interfaces. So basically, they're going to look pretty much the same. I think it is a disadvantage, though, because you can start getting more into not necessarily proprietary, but more of a monopoly. And I think we have to be very, very careful in those instances to go back to a vendor such as EBSCO and say, You know, the majority of our subscriptions are right now through you. Again, can you help? What can you do in terms of maybe helping us make a better deal with these different databases? The other thing to remember too is I shouldn't say purchasing, subscribing to an electronic database is like buying a car or a house. There's no set price. There's no one flat price. All pricing for electronic databases, not electronic journal subscriptions, but databases, are based on such factors as the size of one's library, the size of one's audience or client population. In the case of academic libraries, we tend to be based on what's called FTE, which is full-time equivalent student enrollment, and that changes from one year to the next. Lots and lots of different factors. If a vendor really, really wants to give a particular subscription to a library and wants you to subscribe, they might cut you a better deal for 1 year. They might say, we'll give you a flat price if you'll do like a 3 to 5 year agreement. So that is what I'm seeing right now. I am seeing more and more databases kind of being available through EBSCO, but like I said, I think there are some advantages and disadvantages with that. Having said that, it is what it is. I'm just going to go with it.
Oh, sorry.
I just have a follow-up question on that. Have you noticed any trends in the amount of diversity that's happening within the journal world?
What do you mean by diversity?
So with the consolidation of the aggregation of access to databases, are you seeing any trends in terms of new journals launching, the amount of diversity that's available in the journal world? Is there any impact, any dampening impact or encouraging impact of the consolidation on the actual content that's coming through those aggregators?
So, yes, okay. So the microphone's not good enough to pick you up. So you're talking beautifully the question's coming beautifully to you on the screen, but I'm having to translate it because we're dealing with a tiny little microphone.
Okay.
So the follow-up question was, are you seeing any difference really in the content that is available? Particularly, are you seeing new journals being made available or a diversity of journals being provided because we're moving into one huge player rather than a lot of little players who are all competing at the same sort of thing?
That is an excellent question. I have two answers to that. The first, how do you like that? Oh, I always have at least one answer, right? You know that. So the first answer is kind of going back to EBSCOhost. What I am seeing with EBSCO and the EBSCOhost interface is that either the electronic journal access is available through an EBSCOhost database, and if it's not available through an EBSCOhost database, it's available through an EBSCO journal subscription. So you're working with EBSCO either way. Now, again, having said that, I'm also really, really interested in the concept of open access. I'm not nearly as good with it as I should be, but I am going to be curious to see if, just given all of these different costs and different factors, if we see even more of a movement with academic institutions supporting open access, not only open access textbooks, but also open access journals. I think we're seeing this movement quite a bit in terms of more of an acceptance of open access textbooks being used. I think hopefully we'll see a little bit more happening in terms of an acceptance of open access academic peer-reviewed journals, particularly in terms of publishing for tenure and for promotion guidelines with academic institutions. I know it's just going to be really interesting. So the diversity I'm not necessarily seeing in terms of EBSCO, only because what I see is either the content's there in an EBSCOhost database, or if I don't have the subscription, but if I don't have the full text available, then it might be available through an extra cost for an electronic journal subscription through EBSCOhost. Elsevier is probably the other big, huge player when it comes to academic journals, and in particular electronic academic journals in the sciences and in the social sciences. And also, unfortunately, there are a number of library and information science journals that are published by Elsevier. They're expensive, but again, we need to keep subscribing to them because that's supporting our client population. So yes and no on the diversity. I think we're kind of caught either way, to be honest.
Okay, thanks. And there's a question.
I have a question about Emerald Insight because that is open access or does have open access. And I was curious about the usage or your statistics on Emerald because it's so diverse in what it offers.
So Emerald, is that open access or have elements of open access? And what about the usage statistics on Emerald?
I've got lots of statistics on Emerald as well. Emerald really is not open access. So Emerald would be a journal publisher. We subscribe to a package through Emerald that's called Emerald Management 120. And 120 simply means that it gives us access to 120 of what Emerald would consider to be their top management journals, but management is a little bit of a misnomer because it does include library and information science as well as business management and related journals. So then we pay, again, kind of a chunk of change for that as well. So that's definitely not open access. Again, though, they are considered to be top tier journals in business, in management, in library science. And so and they're being used. That's the thing. I can do my usage statistics in Emerald, and I can look and I can say, you know what, these are being accessed. So there's a good reason right there to keep basically to keep that subscription.
Other questions? Oh, yes, sorry, Karina. Great question. The question is, how do you deselect journals from the databases?
Yes.
And which might also be leading into the question of the big buy, Cynthia, and whether the big buy is still the only way to go.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that was something that you had also asked me to address, so I'm really glad it came up again. So weeding or deselection of electronic resources in general. It's very difficult to say that weeding is just, it's hard no matter what. It doesn't matter. So having said that, if we have an electronic resource, and I'm going to come back to journals in just a second, but I'll just concentrate on a database for right now. So if I have an electronic database and I go back to our dean and I say, you know what, it looks like that it's costing, $75, $100 per full text retrieval. This one really isn't being used very much, and it looks like the price is going up. That can be a potential database to cancel. Again, though, we have to think about, is this one that is really crucial for a department? Is it crucial for accreditation, for example? Is it crucial for research and for curriculum use? But if it is crucial, then why isn't it being used? So that's why it's really important that I keep and I maintain accurate usage statistics for our dean. And that's why I've been doing that cost per search and cost per retrieval for full text databases. We do not take canceling very lightly, though, because, again, there are so many other factors that we have to think about. One thing that we really try to do, since all of the librarians here are liaisons to different academic departments, we always try to go back to our other faculty and we say, is there something else out there that we don't know about, or maybe we haven't used yet, that you think would be a little bit more useful? Or has your curriculum changed? So we ask a lot of questions, but again, if we do weed something or if we cancel something with the database, we don't take that lightly. Now, electronic journal subscriptions. I mentioned that I just finished the second part of the big review of our EBSCO electronic journal subscriptions. Basically, we actually reviewed both our print and electronic journal subscriptions. We don't really have a lot of print anymore, but we have a few. And the librarians did that, and that was based upon data that I provided. So I went back to EBSCO, and I did an analysis for fiscal year of 2017 of every electronic journal subscription that we had through EBSCO. And I provided the cost per full text retrieval for every single one of those. And that was probably about, maybe 100, 125. It was actually quite a bit. And we found, and then the other thing that I provided with that spreadsheet, I did a content overlap. So the content overlap was, do we have an electronic journal subscription through EBSCO? And is that same content, is that same full text available in one or more databases that we also have access to? And if it is, what's the coverage? Is it PDF full text? Is the coverage to the present date? A lot of journal publishers will impose what are called embargoes on their different electronic journals in databases. So that's why sometimes you might be searching in a database and everything except that current year is available, or everything except the current month is available. That's because the journal publisher has put an embargo on the electronic full text access in that publisher, or for that specific database. So we did this content analysis, and of that, we did identify several electronic journal subscriptions that we did decide to cancel because they just simply were not being used, or they were already available in other databases, and we said, okay, we're going to make a commitment to keep those databases. In those cases, again, we went back to the faculty and we said, it looks like we are going to have to cancel these journal subscriptions. We need to cut a certain amount of money, but we will guarantee that access one way or another. Again, though, it is a very hard decision. So that's where, again, you have to really be careful to do your usage statistics very carefully, but be aware of your clientele. Visit with them, make sure the process is open and transparent.
So we are in fact able to deselect individual titles
Of electronic journals.
Of electronic journals.
Mm-hmm.
So we are not involved in a big buy then, are we?
We have a in terms of our electronic journal subscriptions through EBSCO, that would be, it's a big buy, but it is by individual journal titles. So through EBSCO, we can indeed cancel, or we can add separate journal titles. In terms of a database, like Library and Information Science Source, if we decided, which we're not going to do, but if we said, okay, we're going to cancel a Library and Information Science Source, everything is lost. You don't have the index, you don't have the full text of the articles available through that database, you have absolutely nothing. So canceling databases is a huge, huge deal, and I think you need to be very, very careful and make sure that you have usage statistics and also tracking that cost over a number of years before you make that decision. So databases are a big buy in that particular context.
Right, but it's no, I'm sorry if everyone's not quite familiar with big buy. It used to be that for like journals and things, it was like a package. It's like cable TV.
Right.
You get offered a package and you can't pick and choose. You can't select.
Right.
But recently, people have been moving away from that because there has been so much resistance to price increases. But so for our electronic journals, although we are buying a large package of them, each title is in fact selected by you. For
the EBSCO electronic journal subscriptions, it is that way. However, for other e-journal packages, and we have that. This is a great thing to get into. We also have other e-journal packages. So the Emerald Management 120 that we were talking about, that's an e-journal package. So it's either everything or nothing in that package. For Science Direct, which is through Elsevier, that's also another package. And we can switch individual titles in Science Direct, but it's very difficult to do like a full-scale cancellation. So that's another package that, again, you kind of have to go ahead and subscribe to. ACS, the American Chemical Society, the one that we were looking at that's $27,000, they have several package tiers available. And so we've been looking at a tier for the American Chemical Society that might be quite a bit less, but it's also going to provide quite a few fewer journals. And so we're really visiting with our physical science faculty and saying, would these 5 titles be sufficient? For other titles that we would lose, would interlibrary loan be okay for that? So again, it all depends upon the publisher on whether it's going to be just a package deal or whether you can do things individually.
Okay, we're approaching the end of your time. Are there any other questions while Cynthia is here? And I actually have one for you, Cynthia.
Oh, yes.
If we're looking at the American Chemical Society and our retrieval cost is $53,
Right.
what actually would be the cost if we didn't have that and we had to do ILL?
Oh, that is a marvelous question. Right now, we are operating with a very loose and general cutoff of $25 to $30 per full text retrieval. So in other words, if we have an electronic journal or an electronic database that has like over $25 or $30 over the course of a calendar year or a fiscal year, if it's kind of over that per full text retrieval, we might kind of look at that askance and say, maybe we need to do something else. But interlibrary loan takes time. I mean, even if it's just for the full text of an article, you still have that turnaround time. You also have staff time. Now, you're not really processing anything in terms of an interlibrary loan request for an article in terms of mailing out the article because that comes in through your email, but you have that staff time in actually processing that request. And also the downtime. Do you need that immediately? Or can you wait 24 hours or 48 hours? So again, it's all kind of a balancing act as much as anything else. There's no really good answer to that. I think, again, just kind of keeping track of what all of these costs are going to be and really keeping track in terms of an academic library. I think you have to be absolutely aware and always cognizant of the departmental research needs and curriculum needs and do a lot of talking. So cost is going to be kind of about 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Okay,
Yeah.
if there are no more questions, I think we will stretch the microphone to the point where I almost pulled it off the computer. And thank you very much, Cynthia, for your time and your expertise.
Absolutely.
And it's always, oh, just a minute, suddenly, was that a question? No, that was just a stretch. Okay.
Okay.
We're at the point of needing a stretch. But thank you for explaining some of those things to us. There was a lot of eye-opening information in there. And I think we certainly have developed a little bit more of an understanding of some of the complexity of what we're dealing with. So when the students are here, I know some of their questions were perfectly reasonable questions through the semester, and you say, yeah, there actually isn't a particularly easy answer to that. And what you've illustrated for us, Cynthia, is just how complex so many of these decisions and processes that you have to go through really are.
They are.
And some of that's just where we are in the technological sphere of the moment.
Absolutely.
So anyway, thanks. Folks, let's just thank Cynthia for her time.
Oh, you are so welcome. I always, well, and I do. It's I know that it sounds kind of silly, but I really do enjoy talking about this, and it's fun for me to be able to talk a little bit more in a theoretical way of what we're doing, and then the different decisions that we made and the data that we look at. So I will be sure and save this recording, and then I'll go ahead and convert it into a YouTube video, and then I can just go ahead and send you the link if you don't think that should work.
Yes, that would be lovely. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Have a good rest of the afternoon on your end. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Cynthia. Bye.